The 2008 financial crisis was one of the darkest times in modern history. Millions of families lost their homes, their savings, and their futures. For most, this was a nightmare they could never escape, but for others, it was an opportunity. In 99 Homes, 2014, we follow Dennis Nash, a hardworking father who loses everything. But when a ruthless real estate broker offers him a way to make it all back, Dennis faces an impossible choice: fight the system or join it. The deeper he goes, the more corrupt he becomes, until he's no different from the very man who destroyed his life. This is the chilling reality of 99 Homes, a movie that exposes the brutal truth about greed, power, and survival. Dennis Nash isn't lazy. He's a skilled construction worker, a single father, and a man who believes that if you work hard, you should be able to keep what's yours. But life doesn't always work that way. The bank tells him he's 3 months behind on his mortgage. He's tried everything: extra shifts, borrowing from friends, but nothing is enough. Now he's $80,000 in debt and has one last chance: a court appeal to save his home. In a packed courtroom, he pleads with the judge. He begs for time, but the bank's lawyer doesn't care. "Did you in fact miss 3 payments?" the lawyer asks coldly. Dennis hesitates. He wants to explain, to tell them about his sick mother, his struggling son, but none of it matters. The judge rules in favor of the bank. They don't just want his house, they want him out. He turns to his son, forcing a smile. "I'm not gonna lose the house." But deep down, he knows he's lying. And when he gets home, his worst nightmare comes true. When the bank takes your home, you might expect sympathy. Instead, you get Rick Carver. Rick isn't just a real estate broker. He's a predator. His job? Evict struggling families and flip their homes for massive profits. And he's ruthless. To him, people like Dennis aren't victims. They're opportunities. The moment Dennis loses his case, Rick moves in. Sheriffs arrive at his house with an eviction notice. They don't knock, they storm in. Dennis protests, he shouts, but Rick is always one step ahead. "You have 24 hours, he says. No sympathy, no second chances. Dennis watches as his mother and son are thrown out onto the street. And the worst part? There's nothing he can do. That night, Dennis drives aimlessly through the city, making phone calls, searching for any job that can help him rebuild. Every call, another rejection. Until Rick Carver shows up. "You looking for work?" he asks. Dennis should have walked away, but survival makes men do things they never thought possible. At first, it's small jobs. Rick tests Dennis, fixing an AC, moving furniture, clearing abandoned homes. But soon, Dennis sees the real business: evictions, fraud, lies. Dennis starts posting fake foreclosure notices. He steals appliances from abandoned homes and reports them as missing, so Rick can file insurance claims and collect government money. The more Dennis obeys, the more Rick rewards him. At first, Dennis tells himself it's just temporary. But as the paychecks get bigger, so does his appetite for power, and starts enjoying the game. Over the ensuing weeks, Dennis plunged deeper into Rick's underhanded schemes. He started posting foreclosure notices, evicting families, and even pilfering expensive appliances from abandoned properties. At the same time, he snapped photos of items like air conditioning units and pool pumps to mark them as missing, moves that enabled Rick to file bogus claims and pocket government funds. In one exchange, Dennis proclaimed, "I'm going to purchase a home with a pool," only to hear Rick caution him, "If the pool malfunctions, the repair bills will hit you hard." Still, Dennis pressed on. He regularly encountered displaced homeowners whose desperation mirrored his own past. Some hurled threats at him, while others broke down in tears. Even though he felt their pain, he convinced himself that he had no alternative. He evicted residents and flipped houses because the cash he earned at night kept his family afloat. After his shifts, Dennis returned to the motel, striving to appear normal around his mother and son. When his mother inquired, "What do you have in there, a steak?" he concealed the truth, feigning that all was well. Yet guilt gnawed at him, leaving him restless, as his conscience weighed heavily on him. One day, Rick took stock of the pilfered appliances and explained that the government would reimburse them for the replacement costs, offering an easy way to earn money. He then unveiled a fresh scheme, installing bogus tenants in foreclosed properties to snatch extra cash for keys settlements from banks that paid a premium for such deals. Dennis realized he was sinking further into corruption, yet he felt too entangled to extricate himself. A few days later, Rick presented Dennis with a check for $7,200. His share of their illicit profits. Instead of cashing it, Dennis asked Rick to help him reclaim his home. Without delay, Rick agreed to buy the house with his own funds, but warned that Dennis would still owe him $155,000. Thrilled by the chance to regain his home, Dennis accepted Rick's proposal. Rick gave Dennis the gun for protection, but now Dennis saw everything differently. He was determined to play the rigged game people like Rick had been playing. Rick soon took Dennis along to witness an eviction. Mr. and Mrs. Tanner, a couple with young children, were being forced out of their home. At first, Dennis tried to stay detached, calmly telling them they had to leave, whether by choice or by force. He hated having to do it, but he had to ask them to leave. It was clear that Dennis wasn't the type to carry out such harsh actions, but he felt trapped. What else could he do but follow orders to secure his own position? When the police arrived and repeated the same harsh words they had once said to Dennis and his family, something inside him broke. "No, sir. You and your wife are trespassing. This is the bank's property now," Sheriff said, though he was already starting to feel guilty. Still, he stood by and watched as the eviction played out, despite the couple's desperate pleas. They refused his offer to help, calling him disgusting for his role in the brutality. The whole experience left Dennis shaken. Dennis moves his family into a luxury hotel, far from the filthy motel they were stuck in. His mother asks, "Where is this money coming from?" Dennis shrugs. He doesn't have an answer. One day, Rick takes Dennis to an auction. They watch as homes are sold like poker chips, families losing their life savings in minutes. And that's when Rick makes him an offer. "Stick with me, and soon, you'll own your house, maybe even two." For the first time in months, Dennis sees a way out. But to win, he has to keep playing the game. And the deeper he goes, the darker it gets. One day, Dennis is sent to evict an old man. The man doesn't understand why. He's confused. He shows Dennis canceled checks, proof that he paid his mortgage. Dennis knows the truth. The bank lost the paperwork, but they don't care. Dennis kicks the man out anyway. That night, Dennis can't sleep. He stares at the ceiling, wondering if his son will one day see him for what he really is. And then, the moment that changes everything. Dennis is sent to evict a struggling father, Frank Green. But this time, the man refuses to leave. Armed and desperate, Frank holds the police at gunpoint. Dennis freezes, because Frank isn't just some random stranger. Frank is Dennis, or at least, who Dennis used to be. The police scream at Frank to drop his weapon, and then, Dennis does something no one expected. He steps forward and confesses everything. "I cheated you." Frank lowers the gun. The officers move in. Dennis had just saved a life. But he wasn't done yet. Dennis turns on Rick. He hands the police everything. The fraud, the evictions, the illegal deals. Rick, furious, whispers one last warning. "You're making a mistake." But Dennis just shakes his head. "No, I already made one." The next day he goes home. Except his family is gone. Dennis had finally done the right thing, but he had already lost everything. Dennis once believed that money was the answer, a quick fix to all his problems. In his desperate quest for financial salvation, he thought that buying power could restore what he'd lost. But as the path of corruption deepened, he discovered a harsh truth. Every dollar earned came at the expense of his soul. In the end, no amount of wealth could undo the loss of integrity or heal the emotional void left by sacrificing his true self. His journey serves as a stark reminder. While you can buy houses, the price of compromising your values is immeasurable.